It seems like almost everybody is struggling financially nowadays, and there are probably a lot of reasons that we could talk about as to why that's the case. But the one that I personally find to be the most fascinating is the fact that when you look around, almost everybody is doing the same things. People are living very similar lifestyles, and so it should come as no surprise that if you're doing the same thing as everyone else, you're going to wind up struggling the same way that everyone else is struggling.
No shit, Sherlock!
And so in this video, I want to talk about 8 very common money habits that are causing you to struggle and keeping you broke, and you may not even recognize it. Starting with impulse shopping, either as a hobby or out of boredom. I think this is something that everybody, myself included, has done at certain points. You find yourself with a little bit of time on your hands, or you're feeling a little bit bored, or maybe even a little bit lonely, and you think, hey, maybe I'll just go wander around the mall for a little while. Or worse, you find yourself doom scrolling on Amazon of all places. Doom scrolling is such an interesting concept to me because we talk about it in the context of social media, but it's not often talked about in the context of online shopping, where you're endlessly looking for something to buy just because you have nothing better to do. The thing about impulse shopping is that almost every single thing you ever buy impulsively is going to wind up being something you don't need. Because if it was something you needed, or even just genuinely something you actually really wanted, you would have known about it in advance. You would have thought about it. It would have been a planned purchase. But when you're just aimlessly wandering around a store or mindlessly scrolling online and you wind up sporadically buying something, it's pretty much a guarantee that it's not a good purchase. The other thing about impulse shopping is that it makes it incredibly difficult to stick to a budget, because naturally you're not going to budget for something you haven't planned to buy, and so you buy something you haven't budgeted for, and now your budget is blown. Wow, that was a mouthful. My point is that the end of the month comes and you have no money and you don't even know where that money is gone. Like, you might know what your regular bills come out to, but where's everything else? You don't know because you didn't budget for the money that you spent. So if you're feeling bored or you're feeling lonely or you need some stress relief or something, just find something better to do. Go take your dog for a walk, go make coffee, go, I don't know, read a book. Just stop spending money on dumb shit you don't need. I can promise you that whatever it is you're searching for, happiness, fulfillment, excitement, connection, none of that is going to be found on Amazon or TikTok Shop or Temu or whatever. Common money mistake number 2 is lifestyle inflation, and this is a tough one. Lifestyle inflation is when you start making more money and then you inflate your lifestyle and essentially wind up spending all the extra money that you're making. So even though you're making more than ever, you're not actually getting ahead at all. Let's say, for example, you're making $50,000 a year and then you get a nice raise up to $65,000 a year. You could, in theory, keep your lifestyle exactly the same as it always has been and just save all that extra money, but most people don't do that. Most people do one of 2 things. They either decide that because they're making more money and they've worked hard to get this raise, they deserve to treat themselves more, and so they get a nicer place to live, or they start driving a more expensive car, or going out to eat more, or traveling more. Or the other thing they do is, without even realizing it, they wind up blowing all their extra money on small, seemingly inconsequential purchases that they're not even aware of, which I would argue is almost worse. Like, it's one thing to deliberately decide, okay, I'm making more, I'm going to spend more, which can be problematic, but it's a choice, which is a whole different story when you're actually just going out and spending money like water on things without even realizing it. The third common money habit is perhaps one of the most dangerous, and that is using a credit card as an emergency fund.
I'll use my credit card.
It's only more recently that I realized how common this is, and it blew my mind because it is such a dangerous game to play. Essentially, you have little to no money saved, and then if something goes wrong, which inevitably at some point it's going to, you just rely on credit cards to pay for it. So maybe, for example, your dog randomly gets sick, or your car breaks down, or something happens and you have to take time off of work, and you don't have the money to be able to cover those gaps. So you just start billing it to your credit card, which is charging you 20 to 30% interest, and now you're in the hole for a large sum of money that you can't pay off, and it's accumulating interest faster than you'll be able to pay it off, and now you're basically screwed.
How are you gonna get out of here?
We'll dig our way out.
Credit card debt is such a difficult cycle to get out of, because not only is it accumulating very high interest, but now you have this additional monthly payment you have to worry about, and if you didn't have an emergency fund saved in the first place, you probably can't afford to be making this extra payment, and so you're continuing to bill more and more things to the credit card just so you can cover the monthly payment because you don't have the cash to pay for the things you need to buy because you have the monthly payment. You see where I'm going with this. At the absolute very bare minimum, everybody should aim to have 3 to 6 months of your living expenses set aside in a high interest account, somewhere where you don't touch it and you literally only use it for an emergency. Going to your friend's destination wedding is not an emergency. Getting a new iPhone is not an emergency. It really has to be for something that is genuinely an emergency, something you could have never seen coming, something that you have absolutely no choice but to pay for. But by having this 3 to 6 months of your expenses saved up and set aside, it means that even if something terrible happens, if you get sick, if you get injured, if you get laid off, for 3 to 6 months, you don't have to worry. All your bills are covered, and now you have time to get back on your feet without getting stuck in the endless cycle of high interest debt. Now, something else that can not only cost you a lot of money, but cause you a ton of aggravation is having your personal information leaked online. And unfortunately, thanks to data brokers, this is all too common lately. Data brokers compile your personal information from across the web and use it to build a profile about you, including your full name, your current and past addresses and phone numbers, your occupation and workplace, your income, your health records, your political affiliations, your legal history, and even your family tree. And they sell that information to people who can weaponize it against you in the form of stalking, harassment, discrimination, scams, and even identity theft. That's why I personally use the sponsor of this video, Delete Me, to help keep me safe online and help maintain my privacy, which is especially important now that I have a bit of an online following. Delete Me is a hands-off service that monitors the internet and works to consistently remove your sensitive information from hundreds of data brokers so you can stay safe and your private information stays private, as it should. Head over to joindeleteme.com/Nicole or click the link in the description box down below and use the code Nicole to get 20% off a US consumer plan. And thank you very much to Delete Me for keeping me safe and for sponsoring this video. Okay, so common money mistake number 4, again, is a very, very common one, and one that I actually made an entire dedicated video about a few weeks back, but that is financing a car. Listen, I know there are people out there who care a lot about their car. I'm not one of those people. I probably never will be, but there are people out there and people are entitled to like whatever they like, and that's fine.
It's a hybrid. I just couldn't sit back and be a part of destroying the earth anymore.
But it is a terrible financial decision to spend tens of thousands, if not even $100,000 in some cases, on something that is going to rapidly lose value and that in 10 to 15 years will be worth basically nothing, especially when you don't even have that money to spend in the first place. Like, if you're super rich and you can go drop $85,000 in cash on a car like it's nothing, then you do you, go live your life, have fun, enjoy. But if you have to finance that car, if you're spending $600, $700, $800, even $900 a month on it for the next 8 years, all you're really doing is guaranteeing that you're going to be making payments on something that is ultimately worthless. And you're also significantly reducing how much money you're going to be able to save for your future because you're spending it all on a car that you can't afford. And that's not even touching on how crazy the interest rates can be on these cars. In some cases, when all is said and done, you're paying twice as much as the car was ever worth in the first place. So you've taken a $50,000 car, it's cost you $100,000, and by the time you've actually paid it off and you own it, it's worth $0. My advice about cars will always be the same. Buy what you can afford to pay for in cash, get something that's a little bit older, a Honda, a Toyota, something that is reliable, and take that extra money and save it and invest it, and then one day you can afford to buy whatever car you want and nobody can stop you. But if you can't afford to pay for a car, you also can't afford to finance a car. And for no reason should anyone ever be paying essentially a mortgage payment to own a vehicle.
What was our choice, Jade?
Your choice is don't be stupid. That's your choice.
Moving on. Common money mistake number 5 is one that I think is very, very common, that I think almost everybody does, but I've never really heard it talked about, and that is overvaluing your time. I always hear people say things like, oh, doing that isn't worth my time, or that's not worth your time, and it always makes me stop and wonder, how much do you actually think your time is worth? The idea of something actually being not worth your time comes down to opportunity cost, but oddly enough, I would bet that most people who say that don't even know what opportunity cost is. If you make $100 an hour at your job, it would genuinely not be worth your time to leave work an hour early to come home and mow your lawn if you could pay a kid in the neighborhood $20 to do it for you. Because in the time that you've spent 20, you've made 100 and you're still up 80. But if you're only making $20 an hour and you pay somebody, let's say $25 or $30 an hour to clean your house while you're gone for the day, to say that it's not worth your time is completely incorrect. Now, to be fair, it is fine for you to genuinely say, hey, you know what? I don't like doing X, Y, and Z task. I can afford to outsource it, and so I prefer to outsource it. That's fine. But that is a completely different mentality than thinking that something is not worth your time. In order for something to genuinely not be worth your time, you have to make enough money that would actually cost you, you'd actually lose out by pursuing that thing or doing that thing on your own versus outsourcing it. And for most people, depending on the situation, of course, that's often not the case. A few weeks ago, I made a video detailing the process that I went through to get a brand new MacBook for essentially half price. And I was quite surprised to see that I got a couple comments from people saying, oh, well, that's not really worth your time. Like, you have to value your time as well, you know? And I was kind of like, really? Like, I essentially saved $2,000, and the amount of time that it took me to do that was less than an hour. Like, we're talking about small tasks like applying for a credit card or making a quick phone call that takes 5 minutes. And I'm thinking, I put in less than an hour of work combined total, and it saved me $2,000. And there's people out there thinking that that's not worth their time. And that's why people are broke. That very same mentality is the same reason why people often don't bother canceling subscription services that they're not even using. Like it's beneath them, or they're too lazy to take the 10 minutes to cancel, so instead they just keep paying every single month in perpetuity forever. So I'm gonna be pretty harsh here for a second, but there is a very good chance that your time is essentially worthless. If you make $10, $20, $30, even $40 an hour at your job, most things are not beneath you. Most things are not worth your time. If you don't want to do something and you can afford to not do it, that's totally cool, that's your choice to make, but that's a very different conversation from it being genuinely not worth your time. So don't overvalue your time because it's costing you money. Common money mistake number 6 is one that has been talked about a lot, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, and once again, it's one that I made an entire video about. I'll link to it up top if you want to check it out. But that is using meal delivery apps. I will always advocate for cooking at home. Your food is going to be way cheaper, it's probably going to taste way better, it's certainly going to be a lot healthier, and there really are no downsides other than the very small amount of effort that it takes, and even that can be minimized. But if you are going to get food out, which I would recommend not overdoing in general, but if you're going to do it, if you're going to get takeout, whatever you do, do not use those food delivery apps. At minimum, the price of your meal will be double compared to if you just went and picked it up at the restaurant yourself. Not only are the prices on the menus inflated, but you're paying service fees, you're paying delivery fees, you're tipping the driver, and I can only assume that by the time that your food gets to your door, it's not even fresh, and it's probably cold and crappy, so I really personally don't understand the appeal. But I think that this is one of those things like we talked about earlier, these small, seemingly inconsequential purchases that people don't recognize and they add up so quickly. You're spending like $30 to $40 every single time to get McDonald's or a burrito dropped off on your front doorstep. And before you know it, your food budget is blown. You've spent 3 times more than you need to, all because you didn't want to go pick up your own food, or especially because you didn't want to just make it at home. And let me tell you, a burrito is the easiest thing ever to make, and it's so much better when you make it at home. That's a rant for another day, but why do you want cold, soggy French fries sitting on your doorstep? I don't get it. And I especially don't get why you pay $30 for that, but whatever. Common money mistake number 7 is another one that I think we all tend to fall victim to, at least on a subconscious level, if not a conscious level, and that is comparing ourselves to others and finding our self-worth within our belongings. Obviously, social media has made this into a bigger issue than it's ever been before, but even in real life, I think it's very much human nature to look around and compare ourselves to others and what they have and how they're doing, and to look at ourselves and think about how much happier we would be if we were in their spot or if we had what they had, or to start to feel insufficient about the things that we do have, or even ungrateful for them.
He's the luckiest kid in the world. If I could say shitballs to the principal, I'd be so happy.
The thing about this is that no matter who you are and no matter how much you have, there will always be somebody who has more than you have, who has nicer things than you have, who's richer than you, who's more successful than you, and who's maybe even happier than you, and that's just the truth. Trying to keep up with other people is a race that you'll never win because there is no finish line. That's where the term hedonic treadmill comes from, where essentially you're running and running and running, but you're actually getting nowhere, and on a treadmill you could run forever and you're still not going to get anywhere. Beyond just asking yourself what you want out of life, I think a really important thing to ask yourself is why you want what you want. What are you hoping to accomplish by getting that thing? More often than not, it's not actually about the item, but a feeling you're searching for. A feeling of happiness, excitement, connection, contentment, fulfillment. And chances are that if you get that thing, whatever it is, you might feel that feeling you're looking for a day, or maybe even a week, or possibly even a month, maybe, probably not. And before you know it, you're gonna have your eye on something else, and the whole process is gonna start all over again. And finally, money mistake number 8. And this is such a big one, this is such an important one, that if you can genuinely say that you're not making this mistake, the first 7 mistakes are almost kind of permissible. Like if you're nailing it in this regard, you can kind of get away with doing the other 7 and it's not gonna be that big of a deal in most cases. And that is not investing. So many people delay getting started on investing, or just don't invest at all, or don't invest nearly enough, because they think that they have lots of time to worry about it in the future, or they're nervous, or they feel like they don't have enough information, or maybe they just would rather spend the money they have now and not worry about the future. But compound interest is so powerful, and the thing that will ultimately dictate how much money you have at retirement is how early you started investing. And how early you started investing is almost more important than how much you're investing. By investing just $1,000 a month every month for 30 years, you'll have around $2 million when all is said and done. But the craziest part is that of that $2 million, only $360,000 will be money that you actually put in, and the other $1.7 million will be money that basically appeared out of thin air just because you said it and forget it. If you start investing early enough and often enough and consistently enough, you could essentially afford to get DoorDash and finance a car and impulse shop and do all the things that you want to do without any real consequence. But if you're making those first 7 money mistakes and you're not investing, you're essentially setting yourself up to be broke forever. So maybe the next time you're feeling bored and like you want to doom scroll on Amazon, instead take that time and learn to invest. Open up a tax advantaged brokerage account and take that money you were going to spend on something dumb and spend it on yourself in the future. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys in this one. Leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you yourself are making any of these mistakes, or maybe if there's any of these that you're really good at avoiding, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video at all, please go ahead and hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. You can follow me on Instagram. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care. I'll see you next week.